adjustments or relief from specific charges in place for the district?
I don't have anything either.
Okay, great. So the consent agenda is minutes, financial reports, tax collectors reports, etc. Any questions, comments, debate on any of those routine consent agenda items? There being none, anybody like to motion that we approve the consent agenda?
Sure.
Get a motion from Brad. Get a second from Stephanie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Takes us to item 8, review the district's draft fiscal year 2022-23 operating budget and water rate structure.
We did note an error in the memo, the district's memo on page, the pages aren't numbered, but the second page, under the bulk wholesale and retail mud water sewer rates. The last sentence, we were budgeting a residential sewer increase from 485 to 553, not 853. It's just a typo there.
I was taken aback.
We do have David here to talk about your proposed tax rates. That we will publish for this year, and it will be published in the Courier. That's water at 50/50 blend.
That's the beach guy.
Yeah, 65/35 blend last year.
You guys normally have gone for this review in the past. Is it just, this is what we get to support the spreadsheet?
Typically, we'll pass this out and then ask for questions from the board. If you've got almost 30 days to review it, and then we'll discuss it next month and to adopt it based on any review comments that we received, any corrections, any adjustments, any discussion on your tax rate, either keeping it the same or lowering it. September meeting. Yeah, so, and we'll have August revenue,
Actuals.
August actuals, set projections. We'll have those entered, so the September will just be estimating the September actuals.
I guess I would have liked a basis or assumption or objective statements. What are we trying to achieve on this budget? How do we know we're doing good or bad? I mean, if you just open it up on the very first thing, it says we increased revenue by 5%, but expenses are going down 14%. So we got a net gain. So we're building our reserves.
Right.
Why do we need, I mean, was that an explicit instruction or objective to build our reserves? I mean, when I go to my constituencies and say, hey, we're going to charge you more money, but we're not really spending it, so don't worry about it. They don't care whether we spend it or not,
So
right?
typically, we want to.
So are we behind on the revenue, or I mean, on the reserve, and we're making it up this year? Or?
Typically, we want to keep a
It's about 9.5
9
months.
to 12 month reserve. And so that this budget gets us to that 9.
Dollar wise, how much is that?
Fund 7 also made an unbudgeted expense to the Bear Branch and Panther Branch
Yeah.
project, so that's another reason why
Oh,
the reserves had dropped, so it's good to kind of fill with that. There's not a magic answer, every month is different depending on the age of your system.
Our mud and.
And the only rates that have gone up or will go up is the surface water conversion fee effective next month. And we're going to increase the sewer retail rate to match the River Authority wholesale rate. That's the only, just so we're collecting enough to pay the sewer fees, right?
The surface
So it
water,
doesn't go under and we don't lose.
the surface water conversion fee is the debt service on the bonds. Is that why it's maintenance here?
The combined rate of groundwater and surface water.
So there's two
Provide the water.
rates, there's one surface water rate and one groundwater rate.
Okay, I'm just confused.
To the
I should know the answer to that.
We blend those.
Because like the Wetlands Water Agency, we have a policy, you know, you want to have a certain amount of reserves, and if it drops below that, then yeah, there's all these what ifs. So do we have a policy for the mud and other muds on reserves? It's just kind of a general guideline of 9 to 12 months.
Written policy or just kind of the rule of thumb is 6 to 12 months, 9 kind of being the optimum target for reserves. And that used to be, well, that was kind of the cost of a well or some catastrophic issue. Wells have gone up, as River Authority will tell you. So 9 to 12 is kind of more than what we're leaning to as far as a reserve.
So this $633,000 budgeted gain would put us where?
9.5 months
9.5
average for the year. It, starting the year at 7 months, and it'll bring it up to 9.6 in September. If all goes as
So
planned,
what do we expect to end this fiscal year with in terms of?
about 7 months.
That was my
With,
question
with
earlier.
August and
How much
September
is-
unknown, next month we'll have a better picture.
Those are fantastic pieces of information. If you just pull out that information and provide us some background for what's deriving the numbers. I don't have any specific, one number's good or one number's bad. I just want to understand so I can explain and support what's being, or object to what's being promoted. I mean, saying we got behind on reserves this year. I guess the question was it just this year or were we already behind going into this
It's
year?
not necessarily being behind, it's
Well,
just,
it's below our target.
it's up to the board's discretion, how many months
Yeah.
of reserve you'd like to have. So it's a discussion definitely to be had. There wasn't really a reason, target reason, but the year ends in a
Yeah,
net
kind of
gain this year.
for a good sized district, 6 to 12 is the recommendation.
So I'm calculating a penny of the tax rate is 101,000.
Well, theoretically, we could go, hey, let's shoot for a 6-month reserve and see if we can tweak it down, right?
Yeah.
That discussion.
Part of the review and discussion.
Right,
Yeah.
which would beg the question of, okay, well, what are the contingencies we might be worried about? Are we worried about, additional repair and maintenance, capital calls from SGRA or
Yeah, just
Whatever.
unknowns, like the Bear Branch contribution. That's kind of an unknown. We didn't budget for it, but we participated.
flood repairs or,
Yeah. Yeah. Just
what
unknown.
about did you say the Bear Branch drainage area or the Bear Branch dam?
Drainage project.
We got the dam out there as well, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to fund part of that.
That's in the budget though, right?
That's correct. That's an annual
Yeah.
known number that fluctuates somewhat. But
the-
our branch and
No, not the long term, the immediate annual
Right,
expenses.
but there's
Annual maintenance.
millions of dollars of dam repairs for Bear Branch Reservoir, right?
That's potentially in the future that we've talked about having bond financed because of the amount and also because of the useful life of the improvement.
And we've talked about Congress, allocating money and things like that without any reason to believe that's gonna come through, right? Or,
Well, Congressman Crenshaw has approved it to be in his pursuit.
Hmm.
We just haven't heard that the legislation has been put in front of the House and the Senate for approval.
we had a wet year, would that matter at the district level, or is that more of a Woodlands or San Center River?
dry towards the recent months, so that.
Right.
that helped.
We could have a rebound next year and be short on revenues. And those are some of the things that come to my mind, that would determine whether we wanted to target the low end of the range or middle or high end of the reserve range.
I mean, I don't have anything opposed to a 9% or 9-month reserve. 9-month reserve doesn't sound excessive. I just wanted to know what was happening why we were generating more revenue than we were expenses.
Other comments or questions on that reserve amount? Because that's kind of a key, I think.
We could say we want to have a target of 9 months and we want to achieve it in 3 years and we want to go, go to 7.5 or 8 this year and then go to 9 next year and just spread it out. Wouldn't be a
The bigger ones, 46 and 47 are in the 6 to 12. Some of the smaller ones are they're struggling. They have no debt, but their reserves are quite a bit lower.
Let me ask another question. I mean, who provides input to the basis before the budget's created? I mean, who said, let's go to a 9.6 month reserve?
Nobody said, that's just the results of the numbers
But-
that we have.
Was anybody from the MUD provided input or direction or?
This is the time.
It seems like next year we ought to get alignment on the basis and objectives and then develop the budget with those objectives in mind, rather than develop a budget and then come back and say, well, we don't agree with that objective. Redo the
Are you
budget.
talking about just this part or all of it?
Well,
You want to sit with them before the,
my impression was on the other ones, we had the subcommittee, right, provide that input. It sounds like on this, there was no input given.
Audit committee doesn't look at the different MUD budgets. We just look at the bigger SGRA and Woodlands Water Agency budgets.
Which is funded by all the funds. So this is just for review and comments. So if you do have comments over the next 30 days or so, email them or get them to Shelley, Maureen, me, Jim, any of the staff, and we will reply to the whole. But gets the question and gets the response.
You guys want to consider going to a 8-month reserve rather than 9.6?
You don't see any reason to go over 9. Seems like if we could tweak it back, that's.
I think that's why I was asking, what is the reserve? What dollar amount is a 9.6?
So what are the consequences for falling 3 months short? You don't have the money to do what we thought we had to do.
So
You know, lesser reserve.
we talked about this, I think, before. Maybe, Don, you may have been on board when we paid off the debt in Mud 7. I can't remember. I know, Brad, you were right.
I think it was debt free when I came.
5 years ago, probably.
Yeah, no, I wasn't on the board yet.
So what we talked about at the time was that the district had really a one-time opportunity to replenish its reserves and put it in a position to be able to handle some expenses on a cash basis by having a gradual reduction, because you were able to move over the debt service to your M&O rate and have this kind of one time where you could gradually lower your tax rate. Resident taxpayers wouldn't feel a real increase in their tax payments, but the district would be able to be physically conservative by setting aside that cash for future purposes. But once we've gone through that process and you've lowered your rate down, you are a developed district. And so with the change in Senate Bill 2 in 2019, you do have some significant limitations in your ability to go and raise the revenue in the future. So historically, since you paid off your debt, this board has been pretty conservative in the reductions, keeping in mind that this was kind of a one-way street as you go down. Back up. So that's kind of the historical background to kind of set it aside. So if you get a little more aggressive with your reductions, just kind of keep in mind that the backdrop of what you're going to be looking at in the future. If you end up saying, I need more than I thought I did, or you have a repair that chews up a bunch of reserve, you can't just go and replenish it again nearly as easily as this kind of one-time chance.
And just, sorry, I don't want to interrupt
That's
anybody's question. So just to make sure we're budgeting a 50-50 surface water and groundwater blend. Is that what Woodlands Water and SGRA are budgeting as well?
Mhm.
Is that what it was this year?
That was 60.
65-35, right? Why are we going back to 50-50? Just,
The plant can produce an extra million gallons a year, and that was as we understand it, that's the goal of the Woodland
okay, so
Water.
it was 65% groundwater this year?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was the direction of the trustees.
Right.
Found out as a bonus, you can produce an extra million gallons at no real extra charge. No extra
No extra cost.
gas change outs or anything.
And with that being the balance between the cost of operating the facility and trying to maintain as best you can static water elevations for your aquifers.
I just want to be clear what 65-35 meant, you know, versus, because you can easily think it was the other way around. A lot of detail. Anybody want to spend more time on this now, or do you want to make?
Curious what the 9 months. How many dollars is 9.6 or whatever it is?
So it should be on here, right?
Yeah,
Should show
ending
there.
cash is 2.3 million and the total expenses.
Okay.
Can you help us find those numbers on your spreadsheet?
Second page shows the
So
cash.
my pages are,
balances.
are you on this?
Yes, that
So my
page.
pages are page 5 and 6.
Well, it's a 2-page budget, so.
Yeah, the facts.
Okay.
There it is. Oh,
Yeah, I don't have page numbers on
Next side.
I got it. 2.3 million.
I don't know why this page-
Right down.
Okay. So divide that by 9.6 and you should get our monthly.
The monthly.
So a penny in the rate would drop that 102,000. I just-
139.5 or 0.6 thousand per month of reserve. So each penny's a little less than half a month. Penny's 100 grand.
If we wanted to reduce that target by 383,000, that would put us at 8 months, or you round it off to 400,000. That would be reducing our rate by, our water rate by 4 cents. Is that what we're saying? 3 or 4 cents?
Water rate. Tax rate. Oh, did I do that?
That's what it would be to get it down to 8 months reserve instead of 9.6.
They're adjusting water and water rates to do that.
However, I mean, there's different levers you can pull, right? You can either adjust the tax rate or the rate that customers pay for the water.
Bonding authority, if any, that you have left. Do you know how much bonding authority, if any, this you have left? I'm just thinking about another issue, which is to the extent that we don't have additional ad valorem tax bonding authority. If you go draw down lower, and you need cash and you can't get it back through maintenance tax, you would have to impose revenue bonds, which would mean you have to increase your water sewer rates to be able to get those funds. So you always think, okay, if I give up money here, then how would I get it if I need a slug of money? Well, we've got a number of districts that are pretty well used up a lot of your remaining bonding authorization. And if that's the case, we've had this conversation with a couple of districts that you would have to issue revenue bonds, and that would require fairly significant increase in your water sewer rates, because you have non-funded debt service, but you also have to create reserves for that. So stuff. Okay, so yeah, 1.3. We have to see how old that authorization is too. AG's taken the position that some older authorization that hadn't been used in a while is what they call stale, and cannot be used for future bond issues. So you can have some authorizations that if it's technically there, the AG is not going to approve the bond issues. So we have to look at that as well. Yeah. Yeah, we've had that come up in the last year or so with the AG's office. That would be a problem.
Okay, so would we rather run a tight ship or have a little extra reserves? Reserves,
For 8 months. Yeah, so it's a month, more than a month better than what we have now, right?
and it's better than some of the other districts. You have an opinion, Paul and Don, where you'd like to target it?
I'm for being safer. I mean, I think, have enough to prepare for anything rather than get in trouble down the road. I don't know that happened, but that's my concern, is that we chew it down to the point that then something catastrophic does happen and we're trying to hustle up, find
I will
some.
tell you that Mud 60 had a deep sewer collapse last year, and their repair cost was over $600,000. One of those things that was obviously not budgeted for. They're a larger district than you, but it's just an example of what can happen. It's just one of those things.
We've also had some pretty big flood repairs, flood mitigation type repairs that we've done, hundreds of thousands in the past.
Yeah, in all the districts, it was over $2 million in improvements and repairs. Unbudgeted.
So is it reasonable, so I think what would be a reasonable request is that when we get together next month, what would it look like if we did 8 months of reserves, and then we can kind of compare. And what does it do to our rate? What does it, what does it do to what our customers are paying per month? If it's if people say $5 on their water bill, nobody's gonna know the difference. And so maybe we go for more reserves, but if it's gonna be a meaningful amount that people can say, look, we're saving you $25 a month on your water bill, then some people might appreciate
It won't
that.
be anything on the water bill, so it's just on your tax rate. So right now.
Yeah, well, wherever it hits, that's the point, is how much can we save people?
Yeah, and so we're kind of bleeding into the recommendation on the tax rate, but if you look on page 15, if you levy of your packets, levy at what is proposed, which is 11.5, it's slightly above parity. So the tax bill for your residents for the year, not for the month, but for the year would be $31. That's how much more an average taxpayer would pay if you kept the tax rate right where it is. If you go down a penny or so to hit parity, then that's going to be reduced, which it's not going to be a $25 a month delta to your customers. And we're talking pretty small dollars in the scheme of things.
But if we don't do anything, we're going, the way I interpreted the recommendation was we hold tax rates constant, but values went up 10%, more than 10%.
Correct.
So we'll get 10% more revenue from our tax income.
On an average homestead, which is what this calculation is about, the average home would pay $31 more in tax because their appraised values went up. Because your tax rate's already so low, the incremental increase is pretty small. On a percentage basis, yeah, but on actual dollars of what somebody's going to pay on their annual bill, 31. So, y'all are the policymakers, y'all make a decision about what you think is.
So we could cut it a penny. We're still gonna increase our reserves significantly, and we can say we're lowering your tax rate.
lower the tax rate, and then it's roughly the same. I mean, you know, if you do 10.5,
Are you talking parity?
roughly, if you went down a penny to 10.5, and the parity's fraction of a penny less than that, so you're talking what, like a couple dollars more of
Not
annual
even
tax bill? If they do a 10.5,
$3.38.
A year.
for the year.
There's a little bit of a moral victory there. We lowered your tax rate. Yeah, your appraisal went up. I think we lowered your tax rate. So we kept it from going up
Yeah, is that,
appreciably.
You could do a half cent.
Yeah, you can do that. I think David will.
Just,
will
I
encourage
kinda agree
you
with
to
Brad. I
publish
just
the
think
higher
that-
rate because you can go down in September.
I think folks are gonna be shocked with their water bills. Okay, come September.
Shocking.
Well, yeah, well, that's true too.
Yeah.
But the new rate goes in effect in September. If it's still dry, that's a pretty significant increase in water rates.
You know, I mean, I think it's important, it's, you know, we're charged with doing what we think is right for the business, for the community. So it's not just about, you know, we're not asking them to pay more. It's we're asking them to pay the right amount. Okay, I mean, with inflation running 10%, you know, I don't think people are gonna be upset with a 6% increase in their water bill. Okay. But so I don't object to the 6% increase in the fee rate. I'm actually kind of surprised how we did that when some of the stuff we're getting from our suppliers went up 14 and 15%. But still, I like to be good stewards of their money, and growing it over 9% during 9 months, when it looks like 9 months is the typical sweet spot, just seems like we're being excessive in raising more money than we need to. I mean, you know, it's like, how much life insurance do you guys carry? How much home insurance do you carry? I mean, you could always buy more insurance. At some point, you say, enough.
Would be interesting to know if you had an average, the different MUDs. I mean, what's the average monthly reserve balance? Sounds like we're probably already above average.
Fund one is at 15 months,
Which one?
but it varies. It's all over. 6 to 12 is the recommendation, kind of a 9 month sweet spot. Some got a little bit more, but they've got some other expenses. Some have a little less for that same reason as well.
So if we lower the tax rate a half a cent or a cent, we're still gonna be close to 9 months, and we've lowered the rate a little bit. If nothing else, it's a feel good, tax cut, even if it.
We've been lowering it the last couple, 3 years.
Yeah, I know
Lowered
it's
it for
been a
years.
slow, steady decline, especially
Yeah.
since we paid off the debt. I
Many
couldn't tell you what
years.
the exact number is. I don't feel I have that.
At 10.5, it's $1.85 increase.
And at 11,
At 11, it's what? $17.11, no half of that. It's an increase.
and so we're kind of going into the recommendation discussion a little bit, but you're not making your final decision on the rate today. You're just saying, this is the highest rate I would consider levying, because that's what's going to go in the newspaper. We got to publish in a newspaper, the General Circulation, which is the Chronicle. And then y'all, we take it up next month, and that's when you'll make a decision about we're levying X amount.
My request would be to have one of these for 11.5 and 10.5 cents and see what it looks like.
If you publish at 11, then, it'd be 11, 10.5, I guess. But if you publish at 11.5, yeah.
So what if we're saying it's gonna be 11 with this budget?
11.5 is what's in this budget.
We publish at 11.5.
Right.
And do we, I mean, I assume the purpose of publishing is to obtain public feedback.
Correct. Sure, correct.
So when do we obtain that public feedback? We encourage them to come next month
Yes.
to this?
Yes. By law, you have to conduct a public hearing before you adopt the rate. So historically, our rates have been pretty low. So there have been a lot of folks come to clamor about the decision. But
It'll be before they get their September bill too. So
But legally, we do have to publish notice. We have to conduct a public hearing, receive any comments that may be provided. And then once you close the public hearing, we will have discussion about what you want to do. If you want to keep it at the published rate, if you want to go lower, et cetera, and then take action actually.
Next month, whenever we look at this again, can you guys make a little chart that shows, here was the tax rate 20 years ago, by year, what it did? Because I know it's been going down. It'd be just kind of nice to see that trend.
Yep.
If you're doing that, can you add appraisal values? Match that, because those two go together.
On the same chart, yeah.
Yeah, because, if tax rates went down, but appraisal value, appraised values went up, as a homeowner, you're still feeling it. So do we have a decision to publish at 11.5? And then next month, we'll decide whether we want to implement that or implement something sort.
We'll need a motion on that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, publish at 11.
So that's,
The,
wait a minute, that's item 9.
Well, yeah.
because there's no action on 8.
There's no action for 8 this month, no. Do we want to let David go through the financial advisor recommendation and then? make
Yeah,
a
let's
recommendation?
hear his comments before we make a proposal.
I don't know if I have too much ahead, but happy to
This better be good.
be here with y'all to go over the tax rate for the 2022 tax year. Stress what Brian said, we have a two-step process here. Goal for step 1 today is just to determine the total tax rate. We'll put that notice of our public hearing. Next month, conduct a public hearing and formally levy the tax. So again, the tax rate that we decided upon today is the maximum. We can always go lower than that. So we set up our recommendation, working with staff and legal counsel. With Jeannie to get all our numbers and calculations right as far as the new taxable values. And we put together a recommendation that's on page 14. Again, we've been through a lot of the numbers, but what I will say is when I talked about the new taxable values, specifically at least, but the appraisal district certified the 2022 appraisal rolls, and we got those values from them in 2 parts, like we usually do. We get one number that's a value for the properties that are have made their way through the protest process, and we generally have a good kind of good number on the value for those particular properties. And we get a second number for properties that are uncertified, that are still making their way through the protest process. And that number here is on the first sentence of our recommendation. That's the $55 million number. The approved number we got was about $959 million. So we summed those two to get to a 2022 taxable value for the district of $1,015,433,072. That's the value that we're using for the basis of all these calculations here. So last year, the district's taxable value was about $885 million. Of course, levied 11.5 cents last year. Value increase year over year is about 14.62%. And as discussed, the recommendation, has proposal to keep the total tax rate the same at 11.5 cents for all that one maintenance and operations. Page 2 of the recommendation has, a good bit of information we talked about, 3 boxes here. And that top box gives some information on the total revenue numbers, again, which kind of been discussed. Last year's M&O levy generated about $1 million. This year, the proposed rate, 11.5 cents on the new taxable value, and 99% tax collections. That generates about $1.15 million. So about $148,000 over last year's maintenance budget, maintenance revenues in last year's budget, based on the proposed rate, 11.5 cents. And again, middle box there, information on the average homestead. Gone over that, 11.5 cents. Would increase the tax bill on the average homestead approximately $32 year over year. And then finally, that bottom box there is some information about the property tax reform SB2 passed in 2019, came into effect for 2020. So within last year and again this year, the district is a developed district as it's been in previous tax years. And so we worked with Jeannie to perform the necessary calculations of the maximum tax rate that we could adopt without having to have an election. This 12.1737 cents. And so at 11.5 or anything below that, we're well under that SB2 maximum that would require an election for voter approval. So, the amount of our tax rate, of course, the maintenance tax rate is the lever y'all can pull to adjust the reserves to whatever feels necessary, right? But these, the 11.5 cents would get you towards that, closer towards the 12 months or 9 months. If I'm deciding things, I'd like to see, the healthy coverage here, considering where the costs are going, there's dangerous district facilities. But Again, all that said, happy to answer any questions that y'all may have for me. But again, just to reiterate, the goal today is to decide upon the total that we'll put in the notice of public hearing, and that's the maximum for next month's topic. So that's all I have, unless I could answer the question. And then again, we discussed this, but for the rate considerations, 1 penny is worth about $100,000. And that's good for deciding about what we want to do as far as the budget reserves. It may be a good budget.
If we were thinking about going to 10.5 cents, why wouldn't we just pick the parity rate? So we could literally say it's no different. It's 10.44 cents. In the absence of some compelling reason to be higher than that, it's reasonable to me. Pardon?
It's just.
Close enough. We can run up to that. Yeah.
So parity rate is defined as equal income.
Same tax payment from one year to the next.
And it's 55 million that hasn't been certified. That's the minimum they expect that to come
That's a
in.
very conservative estimate of the
Yeah.
value that will ultimately be assigned to properties that are under review. In fact, it's the 2021 value, last year's value. So we assume, no increase on that value.
So we assume some increase on that, and that would give us a little bit more.
Perhaps, it's of course a very small component of the total.
Yeah. 55 out of 100.
With your tax rate, whether it be 11.5 or something else, and that's,
Yeah.
not talking about a large amount of revenues there, but you're correct that if you want to assume something higher. That's probably the direction we're going.
I wasn't proposing we assume some higher. I just want to be comfortable that
Sure.
we got a firm foundation for that number.
That's a conservative, most conservative, estimate on that. Uncertain, but.
Yeah, I just think you want to be reasonable. On, if you find yourself conservative on every number you generate a lot more revenue than you need.
Went back, I was getting that number came in 25% higher than what's listed as uncertified at your, if you did it at your parity rate.
You bring a very big line for $100.
No.
All right, David, that was quick. Anything else?
Nothing else. Again, maximum rate, we could certainly put together this kind of projection based on various levels below 11.5 or at 11.5, and we could.
Yeah, I think Brad already proposed 11.5 cents published, and I think all of us are open to the idea of something less than that potentially when we certify it next month, or when we vote and implement it next month. Are you good with that? Okay, I'll second Brad's motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Appreciate all the discussion and debate, clarifications. Takes us to item 10, FJRA Woodlands Division Report.
Good afternoon. I don't have anything in addition to the information that's already in your packet. If you got any questions for me, I know Dan and Ed have some quick updates for y'all.
Evening, everybody. Quick update on wastewater strategic plan. In your packet, I believe it's page 36. There is a copy of the meeting summary from our progress meeting with our consultant that took place on July 27th. This was a meeting just kind of to summarize where we're currently at, making sure everybody's on the same page with the approach moving forward, the shortlisted alternatives, et cetera, to where the bulk of the discussion was really on the path forward for the cost analysis piece and the evaluation of costs, whether it's life cycle costs, Looking at, other cost assumptions that go into the 50-year plan horizon, the various alternatives, inflation, looking at the bond financing concept. To really, how do we compare and contrast these shortlisted alternatives when it comes down to cost, which reminder is 92% of the weighted evaluation currently. So that's the bulk of the work that our consultant's working on over the next few months, coming up with the cost estimates. We're also working with the financial advisors on how to present those. It may be impacts to rate or percentage impact to rate, so something to pull all that together. Also, on the generally the same timetable, we have the whole water program too, replacement assets, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars over a time period associated with that. So we want to start painting the big picture to y'all on kind of the long-term plans and outlook for the Woodlands infrastructure here. One thing that did come up is actually two things. One being the next official stakeholder meeting is not till November 8th. It was pointed out today that is election day. So we are working to possibly move that stakeholder meeting. Initially, we're looking possibly the week before. So just keep an eye out for that. Don, I think it obviously apply to you. The second item that came up is we did have a request from one of the stakeholders on potentially having a kind of interim stakeholder meeting between now and that November date. Just kind of with the justification that going from July to November is a long time period. So if any stakeholders have an interest in having some interim meeting, let us know.
I think that would be a good idea. It is a long time period.
Is there suggestions you would have on things that you would expect to discuss at that additional meeting? And something to
I
think
guess
about.
getting a better, the alternatives that have been presented have been ruled out based purely on capital costs and not a life cycle cost. So if there's some more input on life cycle costs, confirming that those are still the alternatives we want to be pursuing. You know what I'm saying?
And yeah, and what I can do is, I need to get back with our consultant to see where they would be at, say if we did something in September.
Okay.
Or early October.
Or even October. I mean, just still early October.
What could we have ready to present or reiterate from previous discussions, answering questions stakeholders may have? But yeah, any input on things you would like an update on or things you have questions on would help us formulate an agenda for a meeting.
Okay. I'll think about it.
So yeah, feel free to let me know, Ed. So.
I think it's addressed in the minutes, but one suggestion I had, and I think several people chimed in, I think that you did, Ed, and David Munn did, we're the possibility of doing MRB at Plant 1 for Alternative 1. And so, and maybe that's covered in this, what? MBR, a membrane biological reactor at Plant 1. The base alternative is conventional treatment at both conventional treatment expansions. And there were some positives about membrane MBR.
Volume or more?
Smaller footprint and more odor reduction potential because the basins are covered. So as I suggested as like a alternative 1. I just want to be sure that didn't get.
That is captured to where, right now we would be looking at for renew and replace option using conventional, a renew and replace option transferring to MBR.
Okay.
I think is what you were saying.
Yeah.
Then also the new treatment plant adjacent to replace wastewater treatment facility 1, both in a conventional form and an MBR form. So whether you're calling them alternatives and sub-alternatives, those are kind of the four test board on the treatment side, that Freeze is shortlisted down.
Because were you looking at it from NBR on just the repair and replacement?
I guess the difference between alternative one is expand both plants where they are.
And well.
Or not expand, but repair and replace both plants. It's the same technology,
Yeah.
which is conventional treatment. In alternative
Three,
three
or C or whatever it was.
is do MVR treatment at plant one, but in 20 years, or at the end of the life cycle of plant two, abandon it and send it to plant one, right?
And expand
And expand it again.
Process we have at that plant.
So the real difference between plant one and plant two, looking at MVR, is really the size of the plant site needed.
Right.
At plant one.
So,
And
We're gonna
maybe
be able to-
incremental design parts.
right, I think we're gonna be able to mix and match the information that's being pulled for these alternatives to where, yeah, we would, we have asked Freeze to look at the new replace option for plant two, going to an MBR.
Right.
So yes, and we would be able to, like I said, mix and match, and there might be so-called sub-alternatives, you could say that one.
Okay. So would
Yes, that
would
we did.
we be at a point at the interim meeting to kind of finalize those?
No,
I'd have to
Don't
follow
know.
up, but if that's the request, then yeah, we could see if, what level, where we would be at to be able to present something.
because we had a discussion with financial advisors today about life cycle costs and bond costs and operations costs and trying to zero in on the inflation factor and a couple other things. Yeah, and an interest rate on bonds.
Right.
If you hear all that right, let me know and I'll.
Well, it's best guess today or next week.
Yeah, and I think, we do have an interim meeting there, that's something we could present on is just, hey, the numbers might not be all finalized, but here's our approach of here's what we're gonna present in November and make sure y'all as stakeholders are on board with what to present. Rather than waiting to November to present it and then get feedback, oh, well, we want to see it this way. So
I agree with
I
that.
could see value in that aspect.
Okay. I just think that's a long time.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of, quite honestly, there's a lot of information to prepare between July and November.
Yeah.
Because you're coming into the tail end of the study with hopes that draft recommendations are in front of us in December and the stakeholders and the decision is in front of the stakeholders in January. So as to which direction to go.
Let me encourage you to work some sensitivity cases. In addition to just saying the basis is bond rate is X and interest rate, inflation rate is Y. Bring some sensitivities so we know what we're dealing with, because nobody's got a crystal ball that works,
Right.
okay? And the sensitivities are helpful to understand where your assumed risk is.
Do you have any specific sensitivities? Use our best judgment.
Like if rates 1% higher type of thing?
Yeah. The sensitivity up, plus or minus. Well, I mean, what do you think? I mean, you could take historical inflation rates and you could take some bounds on what's a high, what's a low.
Mhm.
What inflation rate do you guys assume?
Or was talked about the,
Annually for 50-year horizon.
Should be conservative, I would hope.
And then the interest rate is a little more. We're still trying to figure that part.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think the sensitivity, that's a good comment, and try to add on to that, one thing that was discussed today is depending which way, what metric you use to evaluate these, it could change what alternative comes to the forefront, to where if you look things over a 50-year planning horizon at, the bond financing, that may push some of these alternatives that, more of a I guess, some of the bigger capital expenditures spread it out more and make some of those alternatives look more promising, to where if you try to look at it as a metric of, all right, what's the impact of the rate in the next 20 years? Those are going to take those alternatives that require high capital costs in the next 10 years, make them look not as advantageous. So what we talked about is trying to blend some of these different metrics together to where, all right, if you look at it from this angle, here's how the alternatives rank. If you look at it from this angle, alternatives may rank a little different.
So what you're trying to do is find out how robust your recommendation is, and does your recommendation change depending upon your assumptions?
Correct.
If you find a solution that doesn't change on all your assumptions, you feel good. If you find that one assumption you're doing this and you change the assumption just the base a little bit, and all of a sudden you're doing something completely opposite,
Right.
that causes you a lot of concern.
So that's one thing we're sensitive of and trying to present in a transparent way. So, but
I've got two specific.
Sure.
On page 36, I don't know whether this is a typo or the first section talks about a 15 MGD plant compared to 10.2. And the last comment talks about a 10.2 versus a 12. So are we talking 10.2, 12 and 15, or is the 15 and 12? And where the 15 and 12 come from? Why are they different?
sure. So that comment's actually, or questions come up before. It's a little bit two separate things. So the first one is, right now, we are assuming for cost analysis purposes for this study, a 10.2 MGD plant. And that is going to be based on the 6th and final accounting numbers through 2027. So we have a curve that's basically showing the increase in SFDUE up to 2027. We don't have information beyond that right now. So that turns into a flat line between 2027 and 20 throughout the whole.
So that sounds like a key assumption that ought to be highlighted.
Correct. It's also something that we were trying to note is, if we go to a phase 2 of the project, that really is a key piece that needs to be further evaluated, to where if you start taking into consideration other flows, or just contingency of having the contingency on the capacity of the plant, that's where, that 15 MGD number was thrown out, to where, in my opinion, the 15 MGD, I would not get stuck on that. It's just during a phase 2, what analysis do we go through to properly size the capacity of this plant with the potential of additional contingencies? The comment at the bottom that references myself in the 12 MGD, I was trying to figure out, is there a point, or going back to sensitivity analysis, to where if we're assuming a 10.2 MGD plant, and all of a sudden we want to, in phase 2, increase it to a 15, is there impacts to the land acquisition needs? Whether it's a 10 or a 12, 15, whatever it may be. I think in that case, the answer is really no, because we would be planning for that future consolidated option,
For the ultimate.
to where the land acquisition upfront would not change whether we change the capacity of certain phase 2. Is that?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I don't get that from reading this. So, and I understand it's just a summary. I want to make sure it wasn't just a typo, but I mean, to go from 10.2 in 2027 to 15 for as built out as we are in the Woodlands, that seems like a huge increase.
Well, that's to shift capacity from plant 2 down there too, right?
Well, and also keep in mind.
Is that?
No.
No, that's.
Current capacity is 14. Current capacity of the two plants right now is 14.
14. Right. But it's really the uncertainty of potential growth beyond that 2027 date for redevelopment. There might be other entities out there that try to throw us some of their flow that we would have to take into consideration. It's really a phase 2 in-depth analysis.
Well, then if you were consolidating the all the volume of water treatment from plants 2 and 1 together at plant 1, how many MGD would you need to plan for? So 15 would be enough today. So how much would you want to have it?
There could be anywhere from another 1 million gallons a day, or 1 million to 2 million gallons a day.
So 16, 17?
Yeah, you might be upwards, call it 17 or something.
Is that not part of the?
That's part of the fix too.
We know our stakeholders keep us informed, right?
Yeah.
Those are key things that we ought to be aware of. So the last thing I had on page 38, odor control. The SJRA noted the study should assume that headworks will be covered, but not include covering the basins and the clarifiers. So is that assumption endorsed by the stakeholders?
That is going off of the baseline level of service that the stakeholders provided input on.
Okay.
So I want to say that was a medium level of service to where the infrastructure like the headworks, that a lot of the odors would be coming from generating
It's very rarely
would be covered.
odors from clarifiers or generation basins.
But if you don't go with the MRV or MBR, then they're covered anyway, right? Okay. So that's, the exception is if you do a member.
Well, the aeration basins on NPR would still be open, right?
Okay.
And you'd still have the headwork and all that, it would be covered, but there would still be some open areas like aeration basins associated with NPR technology.
And one of the advantages of this property east of the current plant is that it takes you further away from some of the areas that have been complaints. And prevailing wind is southeast to northwest.
Okay, good on that update?
And Don, get a hold of us if you think of anything else.
Okay.
Yes. Take over.
I'm gonna try and do mine fairly quickly. Update on infrastructure funding. We mentioned it earlier. Still waiting to hear about Crenshaw's legislative bill and whether it makes it through the House and Senate. Bear Branch Dam repairs. You all are one of the 5 months that are part of the Bear Branch Dam project. Contractor moved in early July to do the crack sealing, joint repairs, and fill the voids. We have found that there were more joint sealing that needed to be done, and the voids were slightly bigger than what was originally estimated. Now, that was all based on 6 months ago, 10 months ago, when the Stilling Basin had a foot of water on top of it, and once everything dried up because of the drought, we found there's
Shrinkage.
there's 8 inches of sand on top of the Stilling Basin. It was under the water. And when they cleared that off, they found where we needed to do more joint repair. And then we also found a couple of places that were unknown previously, new voids. And so bottom line is we have an overrun of quantity on joint sealing. And we're going to have an overrun on the void repair. The original bid was around 107,000. And we think with the overruns, we're an additional 60,000. So it's 165,000 roughly total project. Budget was 150,000. And so there will be, I'll say, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 less carryover from FY22 to FY23 in the budget. But work needed to be done, and so we're moving forward. That's that one.
So just curiosity and background. So if we hadn't had the drought, that would have stayed undiscovered.
Now, the contractor would have had to have burned it off, pumped it off, and removed the sand, and we found it anyway.
Okay, good. We save a little bit of money, probably him not having to burn it off and pump.
Right.
Okay.
What did they fill the void with?
It's a cementitious grout that's pumped in. You know, you drill a few holes, one to pump it in, and then the other one is to kind of monitor how much grout is going in the hole so that you don't, without the relief holes, you end up lifting the slab.
Mm-hmm.
So. All right, Bear Branch, last meeting we talked about, but in the budget, Bear Branch Dam low flow fault. And the security of it, remember, people are busting the lock on that on a regular basis, and if you open the hatch, there is not any netting or safety grate inside where somebody could fall in. So Muncie had asked us to investigate whether it was feasible to come in and put a safety grate in advance of updating the hatch. And it's not. The reason is, by the time you order the safety grating and install it, and then you follow back up with the hatch, you gotta pull the safety grating out to install the hatch and then reinstall it. Plus there's a 5-week difference in delivery of the hatch versus the safety grating. So we're recommending just to do it all at one time, and we'll proceed with the engineering. That covers that. Dan's back up on Spring Creek Detention Station. Any questions?
Spring Creek Flood Control Dam project. We did cancel our August progress meeting. It is still on the calendar for September 20th for our next progress meeting with the consultant, funding partners, other stakeholders, et cetera, to where what we'll have prepared in conjunction with HAP Associates, our consultant at that meeting, is really, we've been referring it to as a decision maker, how to move forward with that project. It has taken us some time to get to this point. We have spent past month and a half, 2 months coordinating with the Water Development Board because this is a grant funded project. We need to make sure they were on board with anything we were doing that could potentially be out of the scope of work that was approved. So we had to make sure they were okay with us kind of going a little different direction. We said, sure, go ahead, put together a decision maker. Once you get a path forward from the funding partners on that, you'll need to come back to us for potential amendment in scope and grant contract at that point. So this is going to lay out the pros and cons of different path forward. We are also, there is some promise with the Birch Creek Reservoir that the consultant's done some sensitivity modeling on that to where there's a promise that we could significantly shrink the footprint and the volume stored behind that dam, which overall shrinks the project cost with keeping similar benefits downstream here, you know, the reduction of the water surface elevation, say at Kirkendall is one of the main spots that has been monitored. So consultants moving forward with trying to do a little bit more sensitivity analysis on that. We'll have some numbers with essentially a revised best case benefit cost ratio at that September meeting too, to see if that is one of the options that we pursue further. Potentially look at that Birch Creek Reservoir. So that's really all the update I had on Spring Creek. Any questions on that?
That takes us through item 11, which brings it to our attorney's report.
No legal items today to discuss with y'all. On simple math, that number was 14,000, not 1,400. That's what you get when you have your lawyer do your math. It's still not a material amount
On a cell phone.
on my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing but the best, fellas.
Okay.
So
Blame that on
anyway, that's
Apple.
all I've got under item number 12. Happy to answer questions if you have.
Questions for our legal counsel? All right. Takes us to the general manager's report.
Couple of things, there's some complimentary letters in the packet for Margot Anderson, who's one of our customer accounts reps that we always like to receive. Not a whole lot else. I will give you an update on Jim. He is at home. He's getting physical therapy every day at home. Not released to drive yet. He did make it up here last week for Bob Daly's retirement party. Speak every day, he's just not physically here, and just not able to be here, but he is getting better and feels good, just PT gets him sore, so. But he is available by cell phone and kind of anxious to help out wherever you can, so. I'll answer questions on the report if you have them. But that's about it, really kind of a quiet month. Any questions?
All right, that takes us to item 14, and Don was our rep at the Woodlands Water Agency meeting last week. So Don, do you have any information you'd like to share from last week's?
Pretty well covered in the report on 45. Arthur Riehoff was there. Thank the board for their letter recommendation. He did get appointed Region H. And he promised that he would be returning to WWA trustee, maybe even bug meetings.
He was there.
Son. Yeah,
He was introduced at the last meeting, Region H meeting.
yeah. He promises to be continually updating us on what's happening, Region H. That was good. And one thing, I guess I just wasn't aware of it, but there was, and I probably should have been there, WWA Public Education Committee had a draft handout of a questionnaire, and I kind of looked through it, and I might have some comments for. I guess that goes through our trustee, right? That's just at the trustee level.
Report back to the trustee board with whatever their recommendations are. So if you have comments or suggestions or whatever.
How would that normally get to, would that come through you to us, or it not really? Or I guess I'm asking you, are the trustee representative for that? No,
I'm not on that committee.
it's just the committee.
Yeah.
So how does,
Committee, ad hoc
so
committee.
they report back to WWA, but if they're looking for input, you have to be at WWA meeting.
Come to the meeting, you can give me your input that I can share with them.
I probably have some. I was confused by some of the questions in the questionnaire.
Bob Lux, with your.
I met him again. I think I've met him at a stakeholder meeting.
So we don't have a rep on that.
No, it's Rhonda's on that, right? Okay, in summer.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, so Bob Daly was our rep on that for Woodlands Water. Now we've hired, he's not here today, but we introduced John Geiger, who's kind of replaced Bob. John was a environmental services manager over at the township. He's kind of semi-retired, just like Bob, very knowledgeable, some of you may know him. I know Paul knows him. So he's taken Bob's place. Bob got him up to speed. John kind of worked here for a couple of weeks before Bob retired last Friday, so.
Yeah, I've worked with him a long time. He's a champ. I mean, he's a good hire, I think.
I think so.
I think we're replaced Bob.
Well, that committee is for what reason? What do you hope to, what do they hope to, is that a public education kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Strategic.
All right. I can probably call you in with my questions.
I could imagine, if there was misinformation coming from the township or some other organization, then that would be, a committee that could try to help put together a response, from Woodlands Water Agency or from the Board of Trustees that would, clarify any misinformation or counter any disinformation.
I mean, I should know the answers to all those questions, but I was.
Just call
Okay, I'll do that.
Kind of a higher level outreach.
Yeah, and I thought, well, maybe I just know too much, so I'm reading too much into this.
You're overthinking it.
Well, it was about water, the particular one was about water supply. I don't know if it's term supply, but the Woodlands muds supply water or something like that. I'm going, no, they don't.
Different.
Yeah, I mean, I could, if you got it 5 minutes after,
We
I can-
convey it.
yes, but you don't supply it. Yes,
Different people on the committee having different.
Yeah, I know.
Priorities.
That was, stuff like that.
Would probably want to, have some outreach about, why our rates are higher, i.e.
It's on there.
Yeah.
So, Conroe and Magnolia not paying their full bill.
Yeah, that's a
for
good
example.
question.
So I would think if you have some priorities that you'd like to,
Who's responsible?
for the committee to
I was just
consider.
fortunate to be there and see this questionnaire, because otherwise I wouldn't.
Well, they brought this to us earlier, right
Did they?
after I joined, and they asked us if we had suggested
Maybe not the
questions
level that was.
to submit. And I reached out and said, how do you get on it? And I was told, it's, well, the president of the trustee board appoints who he wants on it.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't have a representative from Ed 7.
So here's what was handed out.
It's an ad hoc committee, so he can appoint whoever he wants.
Right.
Mhm.
So this is, I'll make a copy of it.
Do you have a?
No, I don't. I don't have the one.
So related to that, well, I don't know if it's related to that or not. We had the big water day. Right? Can we have a water day? The forum, yeah. Can we get a debrief on that?
I think you can see it online through the thing.
I don't want to watch
An hour long.
yeah, what I was thinking we would get some sort of, does the public feel better about us? They feel worse about us? Do we change?
And he probably would have provided a report. But that's when he hurt his back and wasn't able to go. So I don't think we had a Woodlands Water participant. Did we?
Rick Moffett was on there, not as a Woodlands Water rep, but he kind of filled in for Jim.
Yeah, for Jim and to kind of represent the utility.
So we all, okay.
It was a chamber event.
And it wasn't much community interaction because it was closed. It was just a Facebook Live.
Yeah.
And there were questions that were going to be determined and each person had an opportunity to answer a question. And so it wasn't where the community could ask them a question and that's their opinion on it. There were people giving information in the chat, but it was overall, I think, pretty representative.
It'd be difficult to do a summary of something like that. You had 5 different speakers ranging from our water salesman to, I guess, Mr.
No, wait, wait.
Hall was there, John
What's our
Hall
water
was there.
salesman? What do you mean by that?
What is it?
So
Simon.
there were two, one was an investor-owned utility owner, Simon Cicada. And then
John Hall.
then Spigner from the Lone Star Board. They were kind of in sync with each other. And then there was Mike Turco, Jay Houston, Rick Moffett and John Hall that were, well, they had different opinions of what the water marketers had.
Chamber may have something that, because they were the host of those chamber.
Yeah,
events,
yeah.
So maybe they may.
Yeah, I just didn't, I couldn't squeeze in my schedule, so I was hoping we just sort of debrief, but
Significantly.
But they haven't changed in 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's not like it was new information to, if you've been involved in the process. I was glad the chamber did it. I wish they'd done it 2 years ago, but
my concern is that golf is growing and it's getting more public.
Probably more subject to disinformation than ever.
that's right.
Some of the statements made by the two the two individuals with opposing views, they were called out for misrepresenting facts.
It feels like I should go watch it.
Which is nothing new.
a good
I
service.
mean, I can't believe it's not gonna be in the paper.
Yeah.
You don't think it'll be in the paper?
Well, like I said, if you paid attention, it should have been in the paper 3 to 4 years ago during the whole process. Here we are at the end, the GMA rules were changed. The rules were changed for Lone Star, and now we're gonna have a discussion about it. So I didn't watch it.
Thank you for that update.
Hey, any need for a closed session?
No, sir.
Means we don't need to reconvene. That's correct. So we'll go to item 17, which is discuss matters for placement on future agendas.
Budget and tax rate.
Yeah. Incremental tax rate discussion.
Next week we discuss and
Have a hearing, then discuss among the board. And yes, or no.
still in an hour.
Yes.
Just like tonight.
Well, tonight we don't have any public comment.
That's right. There won't be, I hope that would. Imagine there'll be some.
Any other comments?
I had questions last month about the consumer conference report. Data
About your
were you
parameters.
able to look up anything and,
CCR.
yeah,
I thought we didn't answer your questions, Don.
nobody got back to me, no.
If you would, just follow up with us after this. And
Okay.
we can get it to you.
That was, the reading was 0 and it should be
Yeah.
non-zero.
Yeah, so I think it should be non-zero nine.
I think
We'll see, I don't know.
we discussed it. I
Okay,
just didn't know they didn't get back to you.
all right, I'll ask you.
All right, anything else? Meeting adjourned.